this is an article written by Tish called Improve Your Relational Emotional Intelligence Quotient. And I feel like that's such a like,
Mhm.
it's so hard to like put it all into words. I feel like that's a
It
big
is.
jumble of words, but I loved reading this article and I feel like there was so much
Mm,
in it, so much goodness, and I'm excited to pick your brain. And so I want to
mhm.
start by asking you, who was this article for and what kind of inspired you to write it?
Yes. I think, it reminds me of just a lot of my own journey in learning how to understand the purpose and the role of emotions in my own life and in the role of connection in my relationship with my most important others in my life, my husband and my kids and my closest friends and my faith community. And growing up in a family where we just didn't really talk about emotions. And so I didn't, it was kind of a language that my body spoke, but I wasn't fluent in the language that my body spoke. And so in my own life, I've really had to learn and grow and how to be fluent in emotions that are in my body and how they inform the actions I take and how they inform the connections I'm able to forge with others. So I think when I wrote this article, I wrote it for people like me who, they kind of, our childhood manual gave us a lot of good stuff, but we get to, adulthood and we're like, wait, mine's like missing a few pages. And that really became apparent when I was newly married. And so it kind of started me on a journey of learning more about emotional health.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a lot of our stories is, growing
Mhm.
up in homes where maybe emotion wasn't welcomed, or talking
Yeah,
about emotion wasn't welcomed. And
right.
that just, of course, yeah, like you said, like when you end up, being married and in that new space in your own
Mhm.
home, it's hard to now
Mhm.
navigate emotions in a healthy way. And
Yes,
so I
yes,
love that you wrote this, and I want to kind of dive right into emotion.
yes.
So let's talk about kind of the science behind emotion. You touch on this at the start of your article, and I'm just wondering if
Mhm.
you could kind of reiterate that for the people that haven't read your article yet.
Yeah, you bet. Emotions are physiological kind of states. They show up in physical sensations in our body. So our body feels quicker than our mind thinks. So our body is just, and our brain is taking in the environment around us and is generating from just our authentic experience, our emotions, our core emotions, our fear, anger, sadness, disgust, joy, excitement, and sexual excitement. These are the core emotions that every single human being is wired with. They aren't good, they aren't bad, they just are. And what we do in response in behavior and action to those emotions is something else, but just being able to kind of recognize that our emotions are not bad. They're not good. They just are. And they're meant to give us information about how we're experiencing ourselves, relationships, and the world around us.
Yeah, and I just think it's so interesting that the body feels before the mind does. Because, I struggled with so many digestive issues for years. And it
Mm.
wasn't until I was an adult and I went to a doctor and talked with them about it that I realized that it was
Mhm.
connected to my anxiety and to my fears and all of these different
Yes.
things. And it totally changed the way that I, felt stomach aches. Whereas now I see it almost as like a like it communicating with me, like my stomach communicating, there's something that's making
Yes.
you anxious. And I never thought like that
I
when I
love
was in high
that.
school and experiencing these things. And it's
Mm.
so cool to be an adult now and have that understanding. And I know that
Oh.
that is a lot of people's stories. A lot of people struggle with
Mm.
different chronic illnesses and maybe, things that are physically happening in their bodies that they don't realize are connected to their emotions.
Yes, Tori, that is so good. And I think, our digestive tract is a nervous system organ, and our nervous system is the place that really generates a lot of, especially our stress and kind of rest experiences. And our body is trying to speak to us and communicate to us. I think we think, or I have thought in the past of emotions as kind of like, I don't even know, like this metaphysical like thing out there in the universe that my mind is kind of creating. But emotions are very embodied. They are, hormonal chemical substances in our bloodstream that our body releases that is telling the story of how we're experiencing the world. And then those emotions, those chemical emotions, are distributed throughout our body and impact almost all the tissue of our major organs and of our body. And being able to tune into the story that our body is telling us, like you've learned to do, is an incredible step of self-awareness, of being able to understand what you need, what you're experiencing, and what your body's trying to tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just sort of touched on this, but why are emotions important? Why do they matter?
Oh, emotions. Yes. I mean, emotions are so important. This is a way that we bear the image of God, our core emotions. He wired us with emotions very much on purpose, and every emotion is telling a very important story. And so, fear tells us to seek safety. Sadness tells us to reach out for comfort. Disgust tells us, ooh, that's bad for me, push it away. Anger says, that's not right. That's out of tune with how God created it. We couldn't even know what justice and injustice was without the emotion of anger. And joy, excitement, lest we forget about the good feeling emotions as well. And even sexual excitement of core emotion. These are very connective in not only the painful feeling emotions have the power to connect us as we seek comfort and as we seek protective connection with our loved ones, but also we get to celebrate and be with each other in the joy and in the good things in life. And all of it is for the purpose of connection with ourselves, connection with God, and connection with others. And emotions are the primary messages that we send to be able to be known and to be able to receive from our loved ones, to even know them, understand their heart.
Yeah. Oh, as you're talking, I just think about, us being made in God's image, and emotions being such a key part of that, that like we have these emotions written on us and who we are.
Mm.
Of course, emotions cannot be good sometimes. Sometimes they can lead to not good things, not good actions, whatever it may be. But I totally see in the way that you're talking, just like the heart of the Lord, the heart of the Father, and His emotions, toward us and toward the world and different things. Like you said, justice
Yes.
and injustice and all of these different things. I can see the heart of the Father. And of course, we have to harness them sometimes. We're not perfect, we're not God.
Yes.
But I just totally see
Right.
that. And I think that's such a beautiful part of us being created in His image.
Yes. And, emotions are, I think they have this really bad rap in the church of, like life is not, emotions are dangerous and life is really like you need to like, take and you do need to take every thought captive, but a lot of times it can be taken, a lot of these biblical principles can be taken out of context and really speak that like your emotional experience is not okay. And you should be able to write, theologically or morally, you should be able to write your emotions even before you experience them. And we kind of have it backwards, that emotions are dangerous when felt by like alone.
Mm.
Emotions are not meant to be felt alone. They're meant to drive us to connection. And if you look at the Psalms, every single emotion is represented in the Psalms. And those are literally worship songs of people just crying out the reality of their pain, their anger, their grief, the injustice they see, even feeling like God has forgotten them. And anytime that our emotions are coming up and out in relationship with another, our body was created to then be able to metabolize our emotions through relationship. And so then we're able to get our needs met and we're not driven to toxic action and responses that are much more, kind of impulsive, and where there's like a feeling of not being in control. And so really being able to give space for our emotions just to be what they are, and then take those to our safe, trusted relationships that will actually enable us to have the self-mastery to be able then to choose our response according to what is going to take me towards what I want to be in life and what I want my life to look like and what I want my relationships to look like.
No, I think that's crazy because like emotions, being the purpose of them being to drive us to connection. It's so interesting that that's part of the purpose of emotion. And yet a lot of us choose to experience emotion alone and to like isolate ourselves in it, which is when it becomes, dangerous. When we,
Mhm.
really just like go into our hole of emotion and don't let anybody in. And yet I feel like that's like our default setting, like as human beings, as broken people, that we choose to experience emotion alone.
Yes. And this, I talk a little bit about implicit memory in the article. And this really, you're kind of touching on the results of implicit memory. Implicit memory is built inside of us based on information and experiences that we can't consciously recall. And it creates a procedural memory of just how we reflexively respond to ourselves and to others. And so I think we are born to reach out in our need and to communicate our emotions. When a baby is born, they cry because they expect someone to come, because that is how God created relationships, that babies express their emotions freely. And babies then learn to, as they grow up, children are very resilient and they're going to adopt the emotional unspoken rules of their family because those are like kind of abiding by those rules in our families of origin are going to maintain proximity to our caregivers. So for example, if you have a mother who maybe experiences anxiety and their children are going to sense this. And so a child, I've seen this a lot, where a child just has learned to go inside with their stress, their fear, their anger, anything that could distress mom, because it was actually a smaller price to pay to stuff and suppress emotion than it would have to express it and create greater stress in the home life, or to even push the caregiver away because the child then might become the need of the child might become too overwhelming for the caregiver. And so this is not something that we're born with, the like impulse to be alone in our emotion completely, but we are, this is wired into us by implicit memory, by how our families interact with emotion.
That is so good. And I totally see that on my own story. And I'm sure so many people who are listening in today can also see that in their own lives. So I think that that is just so interesting that you say. So kind of switching gears, but not really.
Yes.
Let's go into emotional intelligence. So that's, this article is about emotional intelligence. So when I think emotional intelligence, I think Spy Kids, like kind of a little bit like, super intense, like intelligence. You know what I mean? I just think
Yes.
that word is like so intense. We just think of more intense things. But let me kind of get from you a definition of emotional intelligence. What is that? Go ahead.
Yes. And I want to start with maybe an encouragement. Maybe you're watching and you're like, oh, shoot, like my family never talked about emotions, like emotions weren't welcome. Like, I don't know what I feel. I don't know how to, I am behind. I don't know, like, am I just this way forever now? And the encouraging news is that we can all grow in our EQ or our emotional intelligence about our life. Our brain can grow and change. And so we can grow in our ability to increase our emotional intelligence and how we interact. And so emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive and to understand our feelings, our emotional experience in our own bodies, and to be able to perceive and understand them inside of our loved one's eternal world, and then be able to use and regulate our emotions for the health of ourselves and for our relationships. And so, simply said, being able to have the self-awareness of your emotion inside of yourself is going to grow your capacity to be able to understand the internal world of your loved one. And to be known, you can't share what you don't know about yourself. And to know, you are not going to be able to receive the internal world of your loved ones unless you can do that within yourself. And to know and be known is the felt experience of connection.
Yeah, yeah. Does everyone have emotional intelligence? Does everyone have it?
Every single person, I would say almost every person, unless we are born with, a neurological disorder of some kind, all human beings are wired with the capacity for emotional intelligence, if you will. And, back to our babies,
Yeah.
that we were talking about before, every baby is born and they intuitively know cry because someone will care and someone will come. And someone comes and comforts them or feeds them or changes them. And that is the beginning of connection for a child. And throughout their life, they either learn it's safe to reach in my need and my emotions, or it isn't.
Mm.
And then that will determine, kind of what becomes practice in our life. And so the good news is we can grow in this. We can learn more how to be vulnerable with ourselves and our loved ones and communicating our emotional experience. And this is vulnerable, Tori. I mean, I remember being newly married and my spouse doing something that hurt my feelings, right? But it's like my internal response was like, it's so stupid that hurt my feelings. Like, I can't share that. Like that, it shouldn't have hurt my feelings. Like I'm being dumb, like I'm being, silly. And so then I would keep it inside.
That's not what they meant to do. Therefore, I shouldn't feel this way.
Exactly. And it's very vulnerable to say, hey, that tone of voice, like that hurt my feelings. Like that is very vulnerable to do and very humbling. And so a big part of this is the stories we tell ourselves about our own emotional experience. And then of course we can't get our needs met, right? Because it actually did hurt my feelings. So even though I didn't want it to hurt my feelings, either two things are going to happen. Either one, I'm going to feel shame about myself, like I'm stupid, I'm dumb, something's wrong with like just my internal experience because I'm wrong. Or I'm going to feel resentful towards my spouse, right? Of like, it's going to kind of ruminate of like him not being able to meet my needs, or I'm not going to feel cared about. But what is blocking it is me kind of bringing my emotional experience that's kind of informing what I need, which is comfort, reassurance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I know what you're going to kind of respond to this, because I feel like this is the reason, but like, why do some people have more emotional intelligence than others? I assume it's, has to do with your childhood and what you experienced as a kid and what you kind of took with you into adulthood. But why would you say that some people kind of have more of a EQ than others?
Yeah, I would say that it's a combination of factors. And one of the factors is certainly how a child's emotions are interacted throughout their development. Of on the first day of kindergarten, a little boy says that his stomach hurts, and his parents may say, hey, your stomach sometimes hurts when you feel nervous. Are you feeling nervous about the first day of kindergarten? And so whenever this is instilled at an early age, the child is going to naturally develop a lot of emotional skill. Also, temperament has a play in this, that different temperaments are just more, kind of more susceptible to be contemplative and to reflect on kind of their own experience and their emotions. Although EQ is not only like being contemplative, it is not only like being aware of your emotions, but it's sharing them in the context of relationship. And so that's a big piece of EQ that we can't learn on our own. We can only learn in relationship. And then I would just say another factor, is growing in our adulthood, going to counseling. I know I am a therapist, but I go to a therapist. And even though I have a degree and have studied these things, it isn't enough for me to necessarily know how, in all circumstances, to be able to apply these things that I've needed help. And my husband and I have needed help. And, we've been able to grow through those experiences as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's encouraging that we don't have to stay where we are in our EQ,
Mhm.
that is
Yes.
able to change. You're able to grow in understanding emotions and in understanding,
Mhm.
your emotions and other people's emotions. And I just think that is so
Yes.
neat that you don't have to kind of stay stuck, if
Mhm.
you will, like where you
Mhm.
were as a kid. So I love that.
Yes.
Next question, kind of moving into your article, you talk about the
Yeah.
primal brain.
Mhm.
And I just thought that was an interesting term. Can you define the
Mhm.
primal brain?
Yes, I'd love to. So you could think of your brain as like in three different layers. And Dan Siegel kind of made the hand model of the brain famous. So if you think of the brain stem as the forearm, and this down here would be the primal brain. It's also called the reptilian brain, or the lizard brain. These are some just terms that it's referred to. And this is the part of the brain that is developed first. It regulates our nervous system, our respiratory system, manages things like our heart rate and our body temperature, and our respiratory system, which if you think about all of those things, are very tied to our nervous system and to our fight, flight, freeze, to our danger responses. So that is intact when we're born. Then the middle part of the brain, if you think about we'll make this the middle part of the brain. This would be like the limbic brain or the midbrain. And this houses our attachment center. It also houses our emotional center and the part of our brain that registers threat. And so this part of the brain is our reflexive brain that is in complete control whenever we are in danger or when our stress level is high. And then over the top of the brain, this is the last part of our brain to be developed. It's our frontal cortex. This is our thinking center. This is the part of the brain that is meant to coordinate and integrate the whole brain experience that is not fully developed until for females, early 20s, for males, more like mid 20s. And when we're distressed and our limbic brain gets agitated because of a relational, emotional, or physical danger, it's like that front brain flips, we flip our lid, and no longer is our language centers, our thinking mind online anymore. And we are all in reaction mode, which is why we can do things and say things and arguments with loved ones that we look back and we're like, for me, I'm like, why was I acting like, like a young adolescent and I'm 36 years old?
Mm.
Oh, it's because of the state that my body and my brain was in. I was escalated and heightened. Therefore, my brain begins to behave differently when it's in that state. So it's kind of a long answer, but that is like the primal brain. I was really referring to like this whole lower region of the brain.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I've never seen that model before. I feel like I've heard these things, obviously, in high school
Yes.
and growing up and all of that, but to see the hand model, that makes so much sense. And I feel like that's
Yes.
such a good way to explain it. And kind of to
Yeah.
sort of touch on, at the end of your article, you keep going kind of through your EQ, and you mentioned 4 EQ skills in action. And I
Mhm.
wanted kind of talk through and emphasize on each of those things that you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. The first one is more of a broad general one, and that is attunement. And this is, Tori, you mentioned this. This is what you have learned to do with your stomach. That, being able to listen to your body, like what sensations are in my body? Like what is my body experiencing? What am I feeling? What emotions are with me? How am I and what am I holding inside of me? And being able to have space in our life can be a big part of this, is to slow down and just to attune to what is our emotional experience inside right now. And there's a lot of research in neurobiology and how doing that with ourselves actually does like build neural pathways that equips us to better be able to perceive and understand the internal worlds of our spouses and our children, our coworkers, our boss, the people that we live very closely with. And so this art of attuning to ourselves then also translates in being able to attune to others. And then as we grow muscles of attuning to others, we grow an ability to attune to ourselves, and it becomes a kind of a really healthy feedback loop in our lives.
Yeah, no, that's so,
Mhm.
so good. And that's like the first of the four that you kind of
Yes.
mentioned. And then moving on from attunement, what's next?
Yes. Yes. So then I wanted to make it super practical
Yeah.
of like, Tish, like, what does this mean like in real life in real time? And so I wanted to give three like very, very practical skills. One is acceptance. And this is harder than it sounds because whenever our loved one is coming to us and they are communicating to us an emotional experience and it just makes no logical sense to us, it's like if that same thing had happened to us, like we would not be having that reaction. We would not be having that response. It's our own spouse. And we're like, how in the world could they have come to that conclusion about my actions or about my words? And it can really rev up, can agitate us and flip our own front brain and, kind of take us away from being able to be present with them. But really being able to kind of have radical acceptance, not of I condone or I endorse or I agree with what they're saying and the conclusions that they're coming to about what has happened, but much more like it's here. And
Mhm.
it's a waste of time to try to eradicate the emotion with reason or with logic, because that's not how emotions work. Emotions move through us and are released through metabolizing with loved ones. And so just saying, accepting that it's here and being able to validate that that experience is real for them. It's real because it's happening. And so there's no, dads or moms, there's no logic you can give that's going to, kind of subtract the emotional chemicals that have already been released in their teenagers' bodies. Number two is um, empathy, right? Or curiosity. And so this is just being curious. This is just asking questions. This is just like, tell me more about that. And what was that like for you? And, it's just like a kind curiosity that we have when something and someone matters to us, of giving them space to kind of be where they are and to, to communicate what they're experiencing, letting them have the experience of being known, which is very calming to the nervous system. This is not just, these are not, just like we're soft handling emotions, if you will. This is the way that God has created our bodies for our nervous systems to co-regulate. And that when our nervous system is agitated, what calms our nervous system is connection with our primary attachment figures in our life. And so as an attachment figure, your main kind of arsenal is acceptance, curiosity, and then the last is empathy. And this is just like caring, like not, we're not moving to solutions yet. This is just saying, like, I'm really sorry that happened.
Mm.
I'm really sorry that your teacher said that to you in front of everyone. Like, I don't like that, or that it just makes me really sad, that your friend is treating you this way. I'm so sorry, honey. And just really the presence of, the relational presence of acceptance, curiosity, and empathy are the most powerful things that we can give our loved ones, and being able to help them have an experience of our care and our love for them.
Mm. That's so good. Tish, what do you hope that someone reading this article,
Mm.
tuning in today, takes away from it?
I hope that they feel inspired to learn, to
Mm.
grow in this area of their life, and that, that it would be empowering to know that, God has created us with such depth of capacity for connection with Himself, with others, and that is really what brings meaning and hopefulness to our life. And so I think I would just really hope that people reading it would feel inspired, to dig into their own selves and into their relationships, and just seek out what growth might look like for them in their lives.
Yeah, that's good. Awesome. Thank you so much Tish, for
Mm-hmm.
sharing your heart, your experiences with us,
Yeah.
and really letting your
Amen.
experiences inspire you to write this article. Because I think that
Yes.
what you've experienced in your story is similar to a lot of people. And I think that it's so
Mm,
important to see counselors who are vulnerable and
mm,
honest, and are inspired by their own experiences to help
mhm,
others. And so I think that's beautiful.
mm.
And I'm just so thankful that you wrote this article. And I definitely
Yes.
took a lot away from it. So I'm sure that other people
Oh,
did as
good.
well.